There are few mysteries more fundamental to modern astrophysics than the riddle of the black hole. Ultra-dense areas of space which catch every surrounding form of matter and light within their gravitational pull and spirit them to a place beyond the event horizon. Nobody knows for certain what might occur when something disappears into a black hole, and in that way, it is not unlike SCP-914, the Clockworks. Whatever object or creature is placed in the intake booth of SCP-914, and the settings are adjusted accordingly, the output booth produces a unique variation of whatever was inside of the Clockworks. The different settings range from rough to very fine, and given the amount of different things that could enter the intake booth, the possibilities of what could be made within SCP-914 are almost limitless. A black hole, on the other hand, and this certainly includes Gaia BH1, the closest of such abyssal celestial bodies to Earth, only has one setting, and as far as science is concerned, no output. Under most circumstances, these two transformative forces would never meet. But when science calls, the SCP Foundation answers with an emphatic, "Sure, why not?" It was an ordinary day at Site-19 when Dr. Gears received a knock on his office door. He invited the unexpected visitor in to find that it was the recently promoted assistant researcher Dr. Neil Carlisle. Dr. Carlisle had come all the way to Site-19 to propose a new test for SCP-914. He wanted to know if it were possible to create a transportation wormhole by refining a black hole. The Foundation had made numerous strides towards space travel in search of anomalies, but had been able to keep ahead of non-anomalous technology by a decade on estimate. Yet apart from improvements in speed and fuel efficiency, the space program at the Foundation had not been able to introduce any remarkable breakthroughs for exploring the universe. With Dr. Carlisle's proposed wormhole, the Foundation might be able to instantly move its spacecraft anywhere in the known universe through the power of a controlled gravity vortex. Dr. Gears, of course, thought the idea was intriguing in theory, but was against it in practice. The nearest black hole to Earth was Gaia BH1, and to transport the entire apparatus of SCP-914 into space and 1,560 light-years away would be incredibly costly. Not to mention the strong possibility of losing SCP-914 to an accident, or even to the depths of the black hole itself. For such a versatile safe-class SCP to be potentially neutralized for the sake of an experiment would be a huge loss for little gain. To be a researcher in Dr. Gears' position meant making hard decisions about containing SCPs, and when it is appropriate to use them for other purposes. It was better for Dr. Carlisle to learn this lesson at the assistant researcher phase of his career rather than go on and compromise the safety of Foundation staff or useful SCPs. Dr. Gears told him no for the proposal and hoped that it would make the gravity of the situation clear, no pun intended. Dr. Carlisle left Dr. Gears' office feeling dejected and occupied himself with an entire tub of ice cream later that evening. The cold dairy delight did help numb the feeling of getting his first research proposal since promotion turned down. He wanted to experiment with a black hole, but now, the only black hole he could feel aware of was the sinking pit inside of his heart. Carlisle spent the next few hours rewatching his comfort shows, but then decided to reach out to a colleague for advice. He got in contact with Dr. Blanche, his trusted mentor, who had been the one to recommend him for promotion. Blanche was frank with Carlisle about the idea needing some work, but also couldn't resist getting some barbs in at Dr. Gears. That's typically for researchers watching over safe-class SCPs, she laughed. Taking risks is the farthest thing from their minds. While Dr. Blanche did have a great deal of respect for Dr. Gears, her own experiences with Euclid-class SCPs meant that her days at the Foundation were filled with more chaotic and immediate problems that demanded her own actions be less measured. She was much more of a think on her feet and roll with the punches sort of researcher, and saw in Dr. Carlisle the same potential to work with volatile SCPs. As such, Dr. Blanche decided to offer her mentee an easy win, a chance to assist in the containment and research of SCP-123, otherwise known as the miniature black hole. Dr. Carlisle was quick to accept the position, and the next day he was sent off to the secure facility that housed SCP-123. Seeing the miniature black hole in person was all that Dr. Carlyle needed to lift his spirits, though he needed to go through several levels of security clearance in order to get to it. Being only a level 2 personnel whose access was officiated recently, Dr. Carlyle was only just barely allowed to be within the same room as SCP-123. Having graduated from a prestigious university for science well before the SCP Foundation got in touch with him for a position, Dr. Carlyle was first and foremost interested in the non-anomalous mysteries of the universe. He had wanted to continue his research into theoretical physics ever since he completed his degree, but the demands of having to remain up to speed on all manner of SCPs seriously hampered his ability to do so. To stand before SCP-123 was at once a reminder of what he had wanted to do with his career, and also a clear symbol of how far his expectations were from the truth. There were so many things he wished to know about the inner workings of these heavy gravity wells, and so, against the wishes of his mentor, Dr. Carlyle absconded with SCP-123. He waited until a severe but inevitable containment breach occurred, and used the chaos as a cover to enact his extraction of the miniature black hole. It was no easy feat to transport the lightless orb out of its secure facility, even with the skeletal cage of metallic triangles that surrounded it as a buffer. The slow and methodical removal with a seamless net was the only way to make sure the black hole couldn't absorb any matter in the process of its transport. While this was a reckless endeavor, Dr. Carlyle knew the properties of black holes well, and as long as his goal was scientific progress, there was no limit to the lengths he would go. The containment breach that gave him his window was extra fortuitous because it offered an easy alibi for why he would be missing. The mobile task forces would be searching for his body, alive or not, and the Foundation worried he could transport SCP-123 back to the facility for SCP-914. By the time the personnel in charge of SCP-123 realized it was missing, the experiments would have already begun. Instead of bringing SCP-914 to Gaia BH-1, Dr. Carlyle had brought a portable and functioning model of a black hole to SCP-914. This is the threshold of scientific advancement, Dr. Carlyle thought to himself. He had run the scenarios 100 times over in his head, and was sure that by placing the miniature black hole into the Clockworks, the world's first wormhole transportation would be born. All would be forgiven, and Dr. Carlyle would be exalted as the man who brought the interstellar travel of the far-flung future to the present day. Even Dr. Gears would understand that SCP-914 had to be used in order to bring about this glorious leap in technology. Carlyle had to act quickly, though, because there would only be a limited amount of time before he was discovered within the facility. With a deliberate and measured hustle, he used the net to maneuver SCP-123 into the intake booth of SCP-914 and closed the door. He ran over to the knob and turned it to the very fine setting. The gears of the Clockworks began to move, signaling that the process of refinement had begun. With the countdown to his breakthrough now begun, Dr. Carlyle barred the door to the room that housed the Clockworks. The mobile task forces would be arriving soon, and they would attempt to stop him from achieving his goal. It would be likely that he would lose his promotion if they succeeded. Dr. Blanche would also be punished for letting Dr. Carlyle get so close to SCP-123. Carlyle would, of course, feel bad for the trouble his mentor would go through in that outcome, but he was determined to make sure it did not happen. The refinement process would reach the output stage, and then the acclaim for himself would be assured. The gears continued to turn, and Dr. Carlyle listened carefully to each mechanical noise and puff of stuff that rumbled from SCP-914. Dr. Carlyle clenched his fist tightly, growing more anxious with each passing moment. "It has to work," he thought. "It has to." Amidst the clockwork noises, a new sound became apparent to Dr. Carlyle. It was the mobile task force trying to break down the barricade. They called out to Dr. Carlyle, using his name as they did. It was clear that they knew everything. Time had run its course, and all of Carlyle's careful planning had reached its limit. Fortunately, the refinement process had also reached its limit. SCP-914 made a distinctive noise, indicating the complete conversion of SCP-123 into its very fine state. Dr. Carlyle put on the astronaut suit that he had stashed in the room in advance. If the result of the output was indeed a wormhole as planned, then he needed to be protected from the potential exposure to deep space. "Time to make history," Carlyle said as he placed the space helmet over his head. The door to the chamber was thrust open from the other side, and mobile task force agents began to move in past the barricade. The MTF were now brandishing arms and demanding that Dr. Carlyle stay where he is, but the Level 2 assistant researcher was already at the door to the output booth. He reached forward and grabbed the handle, flinging open the space to the interior. Inside, a gray sphere of intense gravitational energy tugged on Dr. Carlyle, and within seconds, it pulled him through the small gap which was only a few feet wide. He had disappeared into the wormhole of the refined SCP-914, beyond its event horizon, and into the unknowable depths that existed beyond. The mobile task force agents stood in stunned silence for a moment, until Dr. Gears forced his way into the room. The veteran researcher was quick to ask for an explanation of exactly what happened, and the agents did the best they could try and piece together a reasonable explanation. Meanwhile, inside of the gravitic tunnel of SCP-123, Dr. Carlyle was flung through vast distances in the form of a strand of spaghettified matter. He could scarcely comprehend the sensation of what was happening to his body, the unfathomable movement between dimensions feeling like 1,000 dreams and nightmares colliding. He had succeeded. He had failed. He was going somewhere. He was nowhere. He was traveling beyond the stars. He was stuck in liminal stasis. All of these thoughts passed through Dr. Carlyle's elongated head simultaneously before they all came crashing together with the force of an avalanche. His physical body followed suit, returning to its original shape as he exited the event horizon to the other side of the wormhole. Dr. Carlyle could now see thousands of stars glowing in every direction around him. The emptiness of the expanse he had found himself in became immediately apparent, as did the lack of any gravity beyond a persistent pull behind him. He looked over his shoulder, and through the visor of his helmet, he could see an enormous black hole, or rather, a full-sized one. "Gaia BH1, Carlyle spoke. His highly intelligent mind formed a hypothesis within mere moments. The refined form of SCP-123 had become the entrance to a wormhole as he had expected, but the exit had to naturally develop somewhere, and thus it appeared that Gaia BH1 was chosen as the other side of the wormhole due to nothing else besides its relative proximity to the entrance. Essentially, the refining process had formed a link between the two closest black holes in the universe. Now Dr. Carlyle was faced with a new dilemma. If he passed through Gaia BH1, Dr. Carlyle wasn't sure if he would arrive back on Earth, exiting out of the very fine version of SCP-123, or be flung even farther beyond his current location in space to the next closest black hole to Earth. His consideration of the situation was a moot point, however, as the gravity of Gaia BH1 was already pulling him back through. Dr. Carlyle simply accepted his fate, as there was no sense fighting against gravity. If he did return to Earth, he'd be a hero, and if he didn't, his hypothesis would have been proven right anyway. Dr. Carlyle went once more into the breach, getting spaghettified as he traveled back through the wormhole for an indeterminate amount of time before he was flung out of the event horizon of SCP-123. Earth's gravity hit the doctor like a truck, and he flopped onto the floor in his spacesuit. It seemed as though more time had passed in his absence than he had anticipated, since he was now in the secure containment unit for SCP-123. He stood and removed his helmet, having only a bit of time to take a deep breath before a pair of Level 2 researchers entered the room. "That suit," one of them said. "You're Dr. Carlyle! We thought you were dead," added the other. The Level 2 researchers explained that Dr. Carlyle had been away from Earth for 2 whole days, around 53 hours in total. His experiment had been considered a failure, and containing the altered SCP-123 had taken precedence over doing further tests on it. SCP-914 and SCP-123 had been separated ever since the refining, and Dr. Carlyle's supposed fate of being sucked into the black hole had been deemed sufficient punishment for all parties. Upon hearing the news, Dr. Carlyle simply laughed and laughed. He couldn't help but find some hilarity in the way that everything turned out. The SCP Foundation now had access to a wormhole thanks to him, and he would be sure to be involved in whatever further research would take place regarding it. Dr. Carlyle realized he was still laughing. The stares of the 2 researchers in front of him were becoming unbearable, so he forced himself to regain his composure. You should let Dr. Gears know that I returned," Dr. Carlyle said. The researchers looked at each other and nodded. They then described the state of absolute anger that Dr. Gears had been in for the past few days. He was considering upping the amount of clearance needed to utilize SCP-914, as in his own words, "These experiment pitches were getting ridiculous." Aside from Dr. Gears, Dr. Blanche had been burying herself in a few tubs of ice cream in mourning for the supposed loss of her protege. Like mentor, like student, it seemed. Upon giving it some consideration, Dr. Carlyle decided he would go see Dr. Blanche first. She was unlikely to be proud of him exactly, but she'd definitely be relieved that Dr. Carlyle was still alive, after all. Now go check out SCP-914 What Did You Put in It? Or SCP-049 but in SCP-914 for more.